Hello there, my friend. Welcome to another episode of Talk Music Talk with Boice. I am Boice, and this is my podcast you are checking out. Talk Music Talk is a weekly music interview podcast where I have long-form conversations with people connected to music from different genres, different backgrounds, established and emerging singers, singer-songwriters, music journalists, and even music therapists. And on this new show episode, I had the pleasure of speaking to Kris Davis, an incredible jazz pianist, composer, band leader. Last year, she released an album called Diatom Ribbons, which appeared on multiple Best Albums of the Year list, including #1 jazz album in the New York Times, and also from the NPR Jazz Critics #1 on their list. I had a chance to talk to her a couple of months into the quarantine via Zoom. Great conversation. We talked about life in the quarantine, life during quarantine for her, how it has affected her professionally and creatively. We talked about her life growing up in Calgary, early days of learning to play the piano, moving to New York after attending college. We talk about learning to improvise, improvisation and composition in her songwriting. We discuss creating her own opportunities as a musician, not only for herself, but for others. And of course, we talked about the making of Diatom Ribbons, which features appearances from Esperanza Spalding, Terri, Carrington, and Nels Cline. After the conversation, you will hear a track from it, Rhizomes, which features Nels Cline on guitar. So here it is, without further ado, my conversation with Kris Davis. Enjoy. So I feel like I need to ask everyone I interview at this time, how has it been being Kris Davis in quarantine?
Well, let's see. I guess I'm spending my days teaching first grade to my son, homeschooling him, and spending the other half of the day, I don't know, I guess gardening, trying to play a little piano. I'm not feeling super inspired to, write any music. So I've been playing a little bit of classical music and just trying to keep up my chops and just, play with. I mean, the one nice thing is there are no concerts. I mean, that's the bad thing. The nice thing about it is there's no pressure to have to get repertoire or pieces together. Okay. So I'm just kind of playing for fun, I guess. And, exploration. And, after this, well, we'll see if there's an end to this. But, hopefully when we get back to concerts, it'll be back to the grind.
Okay, that's cool.
Which is, it's nice to have projects to work towards. That's for sure.
Yeah. How is this your first time homeschooling?
Yes. I mean, I lived in Brooklyn for, 8-10 years. And for part of that, my son was little and we hired a teacher with some other families and did the kind of, homeschooling, daycare, trading off houses with the kids and families. And so I guess I've done a little of it, but it's totally different now that he's 6 years old and he's learning to read and write. And it's such a gift to see. I'm traveling so much that to be home and just be part of his learning process and seeing him grow and has been really incredible. So
that's great. Good
I'm grateful for that. Yeah.
Oh, cool. And for the music, when we started this, did you think you were going to feel very productive or like set these goals? Some people were like, well, I'm going to have a whole album finished. Or did you have no expectations for what was going to happen?
I think I was looking at a really busy period, this spring and summer coming up. And I think I was kind of stressed about it actually, because there was just so much traveling and I knew I was going to be tired. So in some ways I was relieved to just know I'd be, getting some sleep and, not running myself down as much as usual. So at first I was kind of looking forward to just the sleep, and now I'm over it and like to get back to working and, feeling creative. But hopefully that'll kick in soon. It hasn't yet.
Did you have have to cancel anything?
Yeah, so much. Yeah. Yeah. I was, yeah, I was supposed to do a Charlie Parker tribute tour, a couple tours. And the first one was in Hong Kong in February, which was canceled. And then we were supposed to tour the States in April. And I was supposed to premiere this silent film project in Germany. And I was supposed to play my first week at the Village Vanguard.
Oh, really?
Got canceled. Okay. Yeah. All my summer concerts supporting the my group Diatom Ribbons got canceled. So now I'm looking at October dates are all now getting canceled. Yeah.
Well, hopefully they won't. We'll see. Because I love going to shows, so it'd be great to get back.
I know. Yeah. Well, I hope I get to meet you in person.
Yes,
I know we had kind of planned to do that, but we'll get to.
Yeah. So, speaking of Diatom Ribbons, you do have an album, Octopus, right?
Yes.
So Octopus, and then Diatom Ribbons, which I had to look up what diatom means. Is this feels like there's an aquatic thing there? Is that intentional, or what's that about?
Yeah, I mean, I usually name my tunes after I record them, and so that was the case with the tune and also the record. And it's usually a process of, I don't know, just exploring outside music and just seeing what sticks. And I was watching a documentary about diatoms, and they're a single cellular algae that creates oxygen. And anyway, I just was found this whole thing fascinating. I'd never heard of them, and it's really, they're really important to us, to breathing, to air. So, I don't know. I incorporated that and maybe some ideas just around nature and science, and use some of these titles that kind of rolled off the tongue. So that's
so how do you choose the titles? That if the song feels like this would fit this title, like how does that come about for you?
Sometimes, but more often it's just like I'm just naming it kind of off the cuff. It doesn't have anything to do with any relation to the actual material of the music. Once in a while it will, but it's more about just kind of what I'm, checking out and what I'm learning about those days. Yeah. Okay. I've a lot of improvised records that I've done, and it's usually this kind of idea where there's an overarching concept, and the name of the record is, something, and then every other tune relates to that. So this kind of follows in that direction. Okay.
And for your improvisation, is there how do you see the difference between the improvisation, say, a composing, and there's a connection between the two? Does one feed the other?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm interested in providing platforms for the band members. So when I bring something in, it's like it provides a seed for improvisation. And Diatom Ribbons is no exception. So it's, it can be that just there's two parts written and everyone else is improvising around it. Maybe it's completely improvised, but there's a kind of a seed of an idea using, maybe a rhythmic idea or an intervallic idea or some sort of texture or, vibe as a directive. So it can really range from being very through composed to being more conceptual and everything in between. And a big part of what I'm interested in is when I'm playing every night, I want every concert to be different. So even if the music's, happening one night, it's like we got to keep evolving it. So, tempos are changing. Just there's always the possibility of, planning to play this tune, but it just didn't feel right in the moment. And so we skipped it, or we only used a piece of it, but when you're playing with kind of like-minded players that are improvisers and, comfortable with that kind of moving in and out and shaping the performance in the moment. That's why I'm doing this. So I'm still playing this kind of music 20 years later.
When did you fall in love with improvising?
When I was 13, and I joined the jazz band at school and played a solo on this ballad, and I just thought, wow, this is great. I'd been playing a lot of classical music and just feeling, maybe it was a little stifling. And I loved playing with people and, feeling like, oh, I can make a mistake. And if I just play it over and over again, it's cool. Okay, good. That works for me.
And you worked on this with your the conductor, the band leader?
Yeah, he had, it was a stage band at school, but he was really into jazz and gave me records by Miles Davis and Keith Jarrett, and that was kind of my, entry point into jazz. And then from there, took some lessons with the pianist and jazz pianist, and hooked up with some of the other younger musicians that were in the band and really were into jazz as well. Kind of just set up a garage band and playing standards every weekend and listening to records together and going to jam sessions. And, all that. So, yeah.
How does one learn improvisation?
Well, it's funny. I was talking to my mom the other day, and she's like, "You told me when you were 15 that you needed to go and learn how to improvise." She's like, "I don't understand what that meant. I thought you just improvise." Which, there's truth to that. But I mean, part of, when you're playing every night, you start to realize, like, oh, I keep playing the same thing. I keep playing the same chords or the same kind of melodic shapes, or, you kind of get into these traps. And so then you have to find ways to address those issues and move outside of them and keep building a library and growing your ears, and the physicality of how you relate to the instrument, that all plays into it. So,
okay.
So, there's a lot of things that go into improvisation. And also for me, a big part was becoming a composer and learning understanding structures and how those structures work within a composition, how they would influence improvisation, and that you really take those ideas, that mentality, and then apply it to improvisation in the moment. And when you do that with other musicians, in the moment, like-minded musicians, you're all composing at the same time. So it's not a free-for-all. There's really organization to it. There's approaches and sort of strategy to make it sound composed in the moment.
Okay. How do you make it sound composed, and do you have a germ of an idea, say, before you go out on stage, of what you as a jump off?
Yeah, and I try not to have any germs. But that being said, you do create a kind of lexicon of language for yourself. So that's part of the practice of improvisation is trying to create your own personal language, and a kind of a library of things that you can tap into in those moments. So things that might sound composed, just elements of composition like texture, harmonic approaches, range of the instruments. Like if the bass player is down low walking, I don't necessarily want to get in that space because it's going to sound really muddy. Two people in that same area might not work. But at the same time, maybe that's an effect you're going for. Maybe you want to create some mud, and so you get in the way. But it's about intention. So. Yeah.
How do you know when it's working when you're improvising on stage or not working? I guess that would be easier to know when it's not working.
I try not to get too caught up in that because in my experience, after I play, if I'm playing and I just think, wow, this is really not going well, usually when I listen back later, sometime, for the most part, I would say it actually was pretty cool. And it can work the other way where you're just thinking you're killing it. And then you go and check it out and it's like, oh no, this wasn't happening. So sometimes that uncertainty can really feed the music. And I try not to allow any kinds of, determinations or what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, any judgments of my own playing or what's happening to affect, what I'm actually doing, because there's no way you can know in the moment.
Okay. So it's only when you have listened back to the tapes that you have some distance.
Yeah, exactly. As an audience member. Yeah. And then evaluate it from there. Yeah.
Okay. And when you got into improvising, was that with that band teacher when you were in school?
Well, that was more traditional kind of jazz, playing standards and playing on chord changes, and more free improvisation came later after college when I went to the Banff Center and met people like Tony Malaby and Angelica Sanchez, who were really into free improvisation. And then I moved to New York shortly after, and that's kind of when the doors opened up for me into free improvisation and blending composition and improvisation.
Did you like that immediately when you to be able to improv like that? Or?
Not really. I spent 3 weeks working on it at Banff, and I was pretty, confused the whole time, but I could see like there was a kind of, when you hear people like Tony play, you can just hear the intention and the passion and, the skill level, it's all there, and the strategy into creating a structure in the moment. And so I was drawn to it, I think because I didn't understand it. And in general, that's true for me in a lot of things, where if I don't understand it, I don't say, oh, this sucks. I'm done with you. It's more like, okay, let me explore this and see like what's actually going on behind the scenes. So that's definitely the case with free improvisation.
Okay. Is it a lot of having to let go of, say, you started out in classical, right? Learning
yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So do you have to like a lot of unlearning that and letting go that, that this is going to take place in the moment, not what's just on the page?
Not really, because I got really into contemporary classical music, and I found that music influenced the language I was developing as an improviser. So actually they worked fairly well together, and it was an important part of the process for me to be playing classical music and trying some of these, things that I was dealing with technically as an improviser, that the contemporary classical music was helping to, explore and just finely tune.
Okay. Did you know there were connections between classical and jazz?
At what point?
Like, when did you learn that there was connections? Did you not see any connections at first?
I don't know. I guess maybe connection-wise, I was making connections through reading music. I always have been a good reader, and that's how that's how I learned classical music from the beginning. It wasn't from ear, but reading scores. And when I started playing jazz, for better or for worse, I was like looking at the real book and reading and looking at, the treble clef and like, why is there only one clef here? And what are these chord symbols? And, so there was a connection in terms of reading, but there was a lot more that, we had to learn outside of the actual, just what's on the page. And especially reading chord symbols, right? You're like, okay, you have to understand the theory of it more, but the reading side of it, there was a connection there.
Oh, okay. Did you always was that a choice for you to play piano, or your parents?
It was my choice. Nobody played in my family, and I had an aunt and a cousin that both played piano, and they came over one day, and I was like, wow, you can do this? Like, you understand this whole other language? And that was it. I was 6 years old and asked my mom for lessons, and she sent me off for piano lessons at school, and they had us playing on these paper keyboards, 10 kids in the class, and my mom came in and she's like, this won't do. So found me a real teacher, and, it kind of went from there.
Okay. Did you like it immediately when you started? The whole learning part?
Yeah, I did. I did enjoy it. There was one point when I wanted to quit, probably about 2 or 3 years into it. And, my parents were like, you have to make it through to the end of the year and then you can quit. But at the time I hit that point, I was back in.
Okay. And did you have an idea that you wanted to have a career? When does that just come in, that you would like to do that professionally?
Yeah, that came in really early, like when I was 13, as I mentioned. Like, it was really after that concert, I was like, this is cool. Like, I think I want to be a jazz pianist. And then, just started pursuing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have examples that was something that, people do Because sometimes when you're young, you don't realize that, people actually do this thing. It just comes out of the air.
Yeah, I didn't have an example, and now that I think about it, like, I don't know what I was thinking, like, or what my parents must have been thinking, because they didn't follow jazz. Like, I don't know what they thought, like how they even thought that would be a career. But I mean, my mom's like always just had faith, and she said she always just trusted me, and it seemed like I knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
So she was like,
even when you didn't know.
Yeah, but I guess I always seemed to like know just what the next step would be, and the piece that was missing that I needed to learn about, or somewhere I needed to go. I always kind of had a forward momentum to my learning and to the music, and she just trusted that.
Did you have an idea what your career would look like? Did you always want to be a band leader, or did you like just to play in other people's groups or projects?
I don't know if I had a real plan with that. I think I wanted to play to be like a bebop pianist, at one point. And it was just clear that would be difficult because it had already been done, and so many people were good at it, who were still playing, and that the market might be saturated, for that kind of thing. So I don't know. It wasn't intentional to get into improvisation, and it just kind of all happened. But I think I did feel like I needed to expand my horizons, and that's why I moved to New York and just tried to immerse myself in the scene and figure out what was out there. And but I don't think I really had a plan. It was just kind of this stepping stones.
Okay.
One day at a time.
Okay. Where are you from originally?
I'm from Calgary.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how was it coming to New York? Had you been visiting, or was that just your first stop in New York when you came?
I came down to New York once before when I moved to Toronto. I went to school at the University of Toronto for 4 years. And while I was there, I came down to New York once to visit some family and just check it out. And I mean, I was like, so I just loved it. Like, I have to be here. I wanted to move here when I finished high school, before I started college, and maybe go to school in New York, but it's just so difficult and expensive for foreign students. So Toronto was a good stepping stone for me, thinking that way. And then I moved down to New York, and I didn't really know if I'd be able to stay. I had to figure out visas and all that. So it was quite a journey.
How did you? What would you say your first proper gig, or like this can actually be something when you were in New York?
When I was in New York,
like something pivotal.
Well, I do remember I was playing a gig with Tom Rainey, the drummer, and Tony Malaby and Ivan Opsvik, and we were playing at this little place in Brooklyn called the Tea Lounge. Uh-oh. Sorry about that. We were playing this little club called the Tea Lounge, which it was a coffee shop, and there used to be gigs there. People would play, and I had my Rhodes, and I just remember playing and like feeling like, like musically, I was just getting to a place where I could really kind of hold my own and take risks in the music, and I don't know, it was all kind of working. Okay. The music was just really happening, and I was kind of finding my own kind of language and being able to apply it, to the music, and really connecting with the other bandmates. So, that's kind of etched in my mind as like a pivotal moment, like, oh, okay, I think I'm like getting better at this. Okay. But that wasn't, that was probably like 6 or 7 years into living in New York. Before that.
Okay. How did you grow your chops? Are you just playing in other people's projects?
Well, playing a lot of classical music, playing kind of extended techniques. I studied prepared piano a little bit with Benoit Delbecq and went to France to take some lessons with him. And then, just playing a lot of classical music. And then just trying to play every day. I was teaching a lot so I could stay in New York, and I would, teach 6-7 hours a day and then go, play a session, or vice versa, play a session, and then go out and see music. So it was, these really long days full of different ways of relating to the music.
Okay. Who were you teaching?
I was teaching young kids. I started teaching at a school in New Jersey, and I was teaching, I think I had like 40 students at one point, just half an hour students, bang, bang, bang,
Yeah.
And beginner students. And then eventually I set up my own studio in Brooklyn, and I would go to students' houses. And I did that for a long time, probably 15, 17 years. And I loved it. I find teaching very creative, and it's been part of my work. It'll always be part of my work. Now I'm teaching at Berkeley, and I just love it.
Yeah. What do you learn from teaching, and how does that affect your own music?
Well, it just seems to bring up, different elements of the music. Like in this pandemic, my students are trying to figure out, like, how do I stay creative? I can't play with other people. And, I'm like, yeah, how do you stay creative? Let me think about that. And so then I was thinking, I have a good friend, trombone player, Ben Gerstein, who's just like a real creative human being. And he did these videos where he's playing drums to Ligeti's Hungarian rock. And he also did some videos of him playing some of Nan Caro's music on trombone and recording all the pieces. It was just like super creative and and it's really about just him connecting and creating in his own space. And so I was thinking about him, and it's like, yeah, maybe I'll get my students to record improvising with Barrio. I don't know if you know Luciano Barrio, but he has these pieces called sequenzas, which are like virtuosic solo pieces for a variety of instruments. So I just had the students improvise with that, and not listen to it ahead of time, just like dive in. Yeah. And it brought up all sorts of things, like first, some of them were like, wow, it sounds like you were having a real conversation in the moment, and so just trying to be creative of like, how do you stay creative at this time? And that's what teaching brings for me.
Yeah. Well, that's what I found so interesting about musicians. Like within the first week of the quarantine, they were like really being creative, like putting on concerts at home, and just like immediate seemed like, musicians jumped into this.
Yeah. I mean, I felt more creative about my teaching than I did about playing at home. So I was like telling them to, hey, be creative, do this. But like, meanwhile, I'm just at home like,
like, do as I say.
Exactly.
Would you regularly, like your writing process, are you like every day you come to the music and practice or whatever like that? Like, well, pre-quarantine.
Yeah, pre-quarantine. I kind of go through phases. Things got so busy that I'd have to plan out times when I would write, like within the year. So I would say, like, okay, I want to do this project here. Everything is planned a year or two in advance, including my downtime and time to work. And you kind of have to like etch that out in the schedule. So it's that, and then the daily sort of upkeep of technique, and as a side person, I'm playing a lot of other people's music, so I'm like spending a lot of time learning their music, preparing for the concerts that are coming up. So, but then there's this kind of larger arc of like wanting to compose and do my own projects. Okay, and, had to figure out a way to balance all of that.
Okay, and going back to when you were in New York, you for your first album, Lifespan. That's right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you always want to be a band leader? Like, how did that come about?
I mean, I think I just felt like I wasn't sure that anybody would ever call me to play gigs. So I'm like, I want to create my own opportunities, I'm going to like, I guess this is what I have to do to play. This is what I'm going to have to do to like, compose my own music. And this is what you do, put a band together. So, yeah.
Yeah. Why did you think people would contact you?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's there's a lot that goes into that question. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I thought I wasn't good enough, or I was too, I was a weirdo in the music, I just wasn't part of the right crowd. I didn't go to school in New York. I didn't have connections. Like the other people I've met at my age all went to like Manhattan School or NYU, or, I basically had like a few people that I knew just from going to the Banff Center, and called them when I got down here, and, kind of went from there. So, part of it's connections, just the familiarity, the kind of like musical cliques that are, that develop, and that's normal and natural. And, I wasn't really part of those early on. So I had to, it just took me longer to find my people.
Well, I like that you said about creating your opportunities instead of waiting for, the opportunities to come to you. Has that always been like your nature?
I guess so.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, it's like, I really love this thing. I love music, I love composing and improvising, and, if no one's going to call me, like, I'm not going to give up. Like, I've got to figure out a way to make that happen. So, yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe I have to do it that way.
Is that what went behind you starting your own label as well? Creating an opportunity?
I had opportunities to record for other labels, but it was more about just wanting to localize where my music was and own all my music going forward. And then giving opportunities to other like-minded musicians and kind of creating a family of, innovators and, in the music, and just seeing where that could go.
Okay. And to talk about the most recent album, Diatom Ribbons, which, had a lot of praise last year, was that planned in a year in advance as well? You said sometimes for your projects?
Yeah. It was actually. About? Yeah, I originally, I thought about doing the recording in January of, I don't know what year that was, 2018. I don't know, a year before I recorded it.
Okay.
And planned that I would spend like all of July writing the music. And then up to that point, I was just researching, listening to all sorts of things, and, transcribing, playing some of those transcriptions on other gigs, playing with, new people. I was playing with Terri, Lyne, and Val, and some other contexts, and, just trying to like kind of move towards a certain direction. But I didn't really know what that was until I would say the summer, when I started writing the pieces, and then, planning the recording and scheduling the dates. Okay. Yeah.
At what point do you decide who you want to have on the album, and are you writing for those particular people?
Yeah, I really love writing for the people, and considering their sound when I'm writing the material. So I rarely write and then decide after. It's kind of like work goes hand in hand.
Okay.
Yeah. So, it's usually, I like playing with people I have a rapport with. But, sometimes it can work the other way where it's great. Like even on Diatom Ribbons, like I never played with Nels before.
Okay.
Nels Cline, or maybe Nels was the only one I hadn't played with. But yeah, just like that can lead to some interesting results too. And then on my record, Duopoly, those were all kind of first meetings, but they were more, based kind of on the improvised side of things.
Okay.
Meeting for the first time and improvising together. But, I like both sides of it. But when I'm actually writing material, it's usually with somebody and somebody's sound in mind.
Okay. And how did it come about? Esperanza Spalding sings on 2 tracks. How did that come about to have her sing?
I had worked with her at the Detroit Jazz Festival for a tribute to Jerry Allen. And I guess I also knew her from before. She'd just come to gigs and, hang out, and, she loves Tony Malaby, and I just thought, wow, this would be really great. Like, let's put these guys on a track together, and let's find like a middle ground that they would feel comfortable, just blowing over and, you know, finding some creative space. And she was down. So that was, you know, such a blessing. And I'm just honored that she, you know, was up for that. And she sounds amazing on the record.
She does.
That her improvising on the very thing is just like mind blowing.
Mm-hmm. Do you go into each album with some kind of intention, or this isn't going to sound like the past albums in some way, or to create something new for yourself?
Sometimes, you know, I've had records where it's like a continuation of the band. I did that earlier on. I have 2 records out with my trio with Tom Rainey and John Hebert. And I have a couple quartet records out and quintet records. And, you know, there's 2 of each of those, as a kind of, you know, continuation of the work. But in the last couple of years, things have been more project based, and yeah, I don't know. I guess it just kind of happened that way. Where I did this like large ensemble infrasound with 4 bass clarinets and the organ, bass or organ, piano, guitar, and drums. I wrote for that project, and then the 2 piano project with Craig Taborn. So yeah, it's all kind of been project based the last few years.
Okay.
Just by coincidence, I think.
Okay. And for Diatom Ribbons, what did you go into that, the expectation for that, and how you would approach that album?
Well, I really love funk and R&B music, and I felt like that was kind of missing in my other projects. I couldn't really figure out a way to connect that music to what I was, you know, actually playing, especially on the piano. So that was kind of what I set out to do, was like, how can I bring the love of this music into my own work? And, you know, a big part of that was working with Terri, Lyne, and Val Genty.
Are there artists you were listening to specifically for this album?
I was listening to so much. You know, I love that Ornette Coleman record, Dancing in Your Head. I was listening to Henry Threadgill. I was listening to Youssou N'Dour. I was listening to Earth, Wind, and Fire, to Ronald Shannon Jackson. It was all kind of all over the place, but I was, you know, researching into some other, you know, artists that I didn't completely know their, you know, body of work. So
okay.
Yeah.
And, I don't know how much you could say, but are you working on something now for your next album?
I'm like very early in the stages of trying to figure that out, you know, for next year. So we'll see. If my creative juices start flowing again, I'll keep you posted.
Post-quarantine?
Yeah. I mean, I expect that like once we get back in, you know, to playing, it's just going to be like a flood of like creation. Everyone's so cooped up and just, you know, it's going to be incredible. So
it'll be interesting to see how musicians respond to this after, like, and kind of interpreting what happened to the art.
Yeah, and also the industry and how it's going to affect, you know, how we actually function as musicians.
Yeah.
And
so we're wrapping up. I wanted to hear about you are at Berklee now. You have a new position there.
Yes.
Yeah, could you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I started in September, and I joined the new institute, Jazz and Gender Justice, which was started by Terri and Carrington. And now there's 5 of us teaching there. Linda Mahan-O, great bass player, and Val Genty, and Terri Lyne and Asia Wood and I. So there's 5 of us in there now, and it's been incredible. I teach 2 ensembles, but part of the job is also to invite guest artists, and we have guest speakers every week, and just hear about their experiences and, you know, issues around gender equity and jazz, and you know, it's really about providing the space for conversation and creating an awareness in the students, awareness for us. You know, we're all learning. There's no hard and fast rule about any of this. It's really about the conversation. But that's what I'm so grateful for this opportunity, because I'm a student there. You know, I'm teaching, but you know, I'm learning so much from that experience, and trying to, bring more free improvisation and composition, to that specific program, and introduce the students to some ideas around, structuring improvisation, like I mentioned before. And,
Okay.
They're super excited, and, I'm so excited to have the opportunity to work with such great students, and, I can see like working with them in the future and providing opportunities. And it's just like, it's really a dream come true. So
That's great. Good for you.
Thank you.
So where's the best place for people to check out music, keep up with what you're doing online?
Well, my website, krisdavis.net, and or the website for the label, which is pyroclasticrecords.com, and then also on Bandcamp. That's probably the best way to purchase music if you're looking for physical copies.
Okay, great. Excellent. Kris, this is a pleasure. I thank you so much.
Hey, thank you so much.
This.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad we were able to make this happen anyway.
Me too. I know. Me too.
Well, you take care. Good to see you.
Thanks. Thank you. Stay healthy. Stay safe. And
Same to you.
Catch you live soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
And that was Rhizomes from Diatom Ribbons by Kris Davis featuring Nels Cline. Get it on Bandcamp. You will love the entire album. If you'd like to find out more Talk Music Talk information, just check out talkmusictalk.com for more podcast information and to stream every single episode. You can also find me on social media everywhere at This Is Boice, especially on Instagram. Follow me there because during the quarantine, I have been doing IG Live interviews with past TMT guests, so you should check that out. A few requests for you. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, and many other places. Just search for Talk Music Talk. You can also find the podcast on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/This Is Boice. And there is also a free app for you to download wherever you like to get your apps. Again, just search for Talk Music Talk. All the links in the show notes, of course. Thank you so much for listening to this episode with Kris Davis. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, and there will be a next time, this one's for you, Liz.